It's always dangerous to mistake art for autobiography, but I can't help thinking a lot of this story is your story.
Right. Yeah, man, I it's been an incredible kind of like cathartic experience writing this film, Frybread Face and Me. I pulled elements from my upbringing, memory, but as a film, you have to create conflict and a beginning, middle, and end. So there's elements that are from memory. There's parts that are my story, but a lot of it is I just created for this character Benny. So I also think that my documentary background came into play as I was writing and filming. So I think those kind of there was a balance of both my truth and Benny's story, which was completely kind of a fictitious. For instance, my parents have been married for over 60 years, so there's just yeah, it's just to create conflict for story.
Well, there's a famous Woody Allen line in Annie Hall. If only life were like this. Uh, did you try to maybe straighten some things out in your fiction that maybe were kind of messed up in your life?
Well, I one major I think thing about writing this story was I couldn't have written the story in my 20s. I needed all these kind of experiences now that I'm in my 40s to kind of really make sense, because as a kid you're still figuring things out, and as I got older, my teens, 20s, and 30s, I was still trying to figure those out. So I think I needed to be a father. I needed to come to terms of what my parents went through growing up. My mother, for instance, the boarding schools, my father coming back from Vietnam. Um, Kind of just unspoken experiences and trauma that were in their lives that I didn't really have a grasp on. And it wasn't until, like I said, now in my 40s that I'm starting to ask questions and things starting to make sense.
I forget who it was who said this, but there was a day in your life you didn't recognize it at the time, but it was the last day you played with your childhood friends. And it doesn't necessarily mean one of them died or you moved, but that was the last day you were all together. Uh, did you look upon this story as maybe the last time all of these characters were together?
One thing that after you said that, one thing that comes to mind is, being on the reservation with my cousins. And as we were kids, we played around. There was no electricity, no running water, and no Wi-Fi at the time, no cell phones. So it was all just as, being just having my grandmother's ranch as kind of this huge playground. Um, and those, as we started getting older, growing up in our teen years, we started kind of like separating, going our separate ways. So I just remember, I think I was in college when I went back to my grandmother's ranch in Arizona, and my cousins weren't there. And we were all living our lives. Some had started families, some went to college. But one thing that stood out as a child was this tree with this a rope that we used to swing on, and it makes a brief cameo in my film. But that was a memory that I we specifically played with, and it's still there to this day. And it's a reminder to me, of all the times that we had with our grandmother when she was alive. It just brought back a flood of memories, and still hear us laughing and swinging around, and yeah, that was just kind of like that moment.
Now, where you filmed, was it anywhere near where your grandmother's place was?
Ideally, I wanted to go in and film on my grandmother's ranch, just because the landscape was just so incredibly, it was just an incredible, beautiful ranch. But COVID at the time, it was just coming, 2021 summertime, but the Navajo Nation was still closed off for any visitors or any filming. So that also played a factor in not filming, but also how remote it was for our cast and crew. There was no place for us to kind of have I think the nearest hotel was, about an hour and 15 minutes away from the ranch. So we filmed in Santa Fe. I found this land, this area that was, there was nothing there, but it's something about it just felt true, and it just kind of reminded me of res and ranch life at my grandmother's.
Was it difficult or easy for you to cast this film? I'm thinking not only the two leads who are remarkable, but you also have some familiar faces. I mean, Mr. Sensmeier is doing a role. I don't think I've ever seen him do that kind of role before. How difficult was it to get the right people for the right parts?
It's funny that you mentioned Martin. Like Martin and his wife Kahara, who plays Aunt Lucy, they were kind of in the back of my head when I was creating these characters and writing. And I had never seen Martin, play a role like this, but I knew he was such a great actor. And when he read it, he was like, "I know this uncle. I had this uncle, and I want to be this uncle in this film." And but those, so those were the kind of the first two actors cast. And we were casting during peak pandemic, so all of my casting and auditions were done through Zoom, and that was difficult, because you want to create this kind of this physical, connection with these actors, especially the two leads. You wanted to make sure that they had the right amount of chemistry and for them to play off each other. Casting was incredible. We worked with Angelique Midthunder with Midthunder Casting, and she's her and her team, really brought these kids to me, and because she already had her hand in casting Reservation Dogs, she had her hand already in youth and Native youth and kids. So she brought these kids to me. And as soon as we saw Charley Hogan, who plays Frybread Face, we knew that was we knew that was her. It was just this spark that went through the Zoom screen, and Kier was just the perfect as well, because he was just the perfect actor to play. Both of them are non-actors. This is their first project, so. But Kier had this, innocence and shyness, and it was just at that moment before puberty, I think, that really kind of carried his performance. He was full of wonder and exploring worlds and wanting to try things, new things, and we just went on a great journey with these two actors together.
Now I have to ask this: how many Fleetwood Mac T-shirts did you have around? Because I think for the first half of the movie, that's all he wears. And I was thinking, okay, now if he spills something on this, or if there's a mishap on the set, how easy is it going to be to replace not only this particular shirt, but this particular shirt from, say, the 1990 or so?
Right. Yeah, him and Fry kind of wear the same outfits. I think Fry was in that outfit more than Benny was in that T-shirt. But we had two Fleetwood Mac T-shirts, and we would always wash one every night, and then so it was really great. And if he spilled something, it's like res life. You live with the stains.
How difficult was it to get the rights for Starman?
Yeah, it's difficult to get a lot of the archive, and I mean, material. But we just went through the same route that any other film goes through. We tell them how low budget we are and try to work with them. Especially with Paul Rubens and Pee Wee Herman. That makes a brief
Mm-hmm.
cameo as well in the opening. Um, yeah, we just had to write these letters that really kind of explain the story, and luckily they agreed. And of course, when you have actors on screen too, you have to get their permission just because of
Mm-hmm.
their rights. So we're able to get for Starman their permission, and it really helps kind of create this world of Benny, and kind of that time of when the time that this film takes place.
Did you tell Jeff Bridges you'd have a doll named after him in the film?
No, we did not. It's a nice surprise that I hope he sees. So that Starman really played a role in my kind of growing up and wanting to be a storyteller filmmaker. So I really wanted to kind of pay homage to that film and what it meant to me. And yeah, I think it fits perfectly into the film.
This strikes me as a really unprecedented time for Native Americans on both sides of the camera. Uh, there's a lot more television, there's a lot more movies that are centered on Indigenous life. And you seem to be making transition not only from documentaries, but you've worked on, Dark Winds. Uh, how do you feel right now? I mean, do you feel like I'm glad I'm doing this now and not trying to do it 20 years ago or even 10 years ago?
Yeah, the funny thing I mentioned, I've been, writing and trying to get my films made for 20 years. And I think now we're seeing this kind of, I think probably within the last 10 years, we've seen this kind of, this movement of Indigenous filmmakers. I think one of the main filmmakers who kind of really made an impact has been Taika Waititi. Of course, he executive produced my film Frybread Face, and I think he's just has the most star power, and so many people want to work with him, and Sterling and I, we've known each other for 20 years, and we were all kind of sleeping on each other's couches trying to make movies, and at the time Sterling and Taika were making their short films. So it's really fascinating to see this, all of us now making these films and telling our stories, but there's so many other filmmakers out there that are doing the same, the younger generation. I just it's I think people are wanting to see something fresh and new, and you see in Hollywood they just keep remaking these classic films, and really kind of the sequels, like there's 4 or 5 sequels to a film now. And I think people are just hungry for a different take on the world, and stories and characters. And there's also an audience for it. Natives want to see themselves on screen. That's something that I didn't have growing up. So yeah, I think there's a lot of things that come into play when here we are with great fresh films and ideas.
One last question. You mentioned classic films, and I couldn't help but think of Francois Truffaut and the 400 Blows, and
Mm-hmm.
how he wound up following Antoine Doinel through 3 other movies. Uh, do you hope that if enough attention, the attention that this movie deserves is paid? Would you like to pick up his story, your protagonist story, a few years later, and then maybe a few years after that?
Yeah, we were filming on set, and during that summer of 2021, and all of us were just having such a great time together. And I remember Martin saying, we should do a sequel. And have Frybread come out to the city and have a summer with Betty. Yeah, in a lot of my stories, there's me in there. There's a lot of my writings are experiences that I had. So as a kid, I was just always curious, and I was always listening to conversations that my parents had and their adult friends or relatives. So I just this protagonist of Benny, he's just this kind kid, and I had a great time doing the VO for it. So potentially there's maybe there's a Boyhood. We can just put them all together and make a 6-hour film. But yeah, I mean, I that's the one question I get. How is Frybread now? What is she doing now? And a lot of my Q&As have that question. But Frybread's just a made-up character that people are connecting with, and that's really kind of special when you make films.
Well, thank you very much. Good luck to you in the film, and I hope to be seeing a lot more films from you, and I hope to eventually see a bit more of these specific characters. Thank you again.
Awesome. Thank you.